Introduction. The whole world is talking about an inscription known as Gabriel's Revelation. Israel Museum curators have called it the most important document found in the area since the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The script dates to the turn of the era, just like a Dead Sea Scroll. The inked writing is laid out in prepared columns, just like a Dead Sea Scroll. The text contains Bible-like prophecies, just like some of the Dead Sea Scrolls. But this document isn't a scroll at all, it's a stone slab. This ebook shares the two definitive publications on an artifact that has led biblical archaeologists to reconsider ancient Jewish perceptions of messianic figures. Published just in time for the Israel Museum exhibit, I Am Gabriel, a scroll in stone from the time of Herod, this ebook provides translations and contexts for the artifact and contemporary belief systems. Ada Yadini's Biblical Archaeology Review article, A New Dead Sea Scroll in Stone, was the first publication of an English translation of the artifact in 2008. Later that year, Israel Noel's bar follow-up, The Messiah Son of Joseph, caused an enormous stir when Noel deciphered a line reading, In 3 days, you shall live. Noel understood these lines from Gabriel's revelation to mean, in 3 days, you shall return to life, be resurrected. Noel's translation and discussion, reprinted in full in this ebook, have been a subject of recent discussion in international publications from The Telegraph to Fox News. Noel's translation of the 1st century B.C. Gabriel's Revelation inscription, and its revelations on Jewish messianism, predate the life of Jesus. What does Gabriel's Revelation tell us about the Jewish concept of a Messiah leading up to the life of Jesus? Ada Yadini's analysis of the artifact and Israel Noel's discussion of the Jewish origins of a suffering Messiah and resurrection on the third day put Gabriel's Revelation in its ancient context while highlighting its significance in the latest theological debates. Cover photo, Zev Radovan www. Bibelan Pictures.com. The inscription dubbed Gabriel's Revelation is from the collection of David Jeselsohn of Zurich and Jerusalem, who lent the stone to the Israel Museum for the temporary exhibition. We continue to be grateful to collectors who allow their artifacts and inscriptions to be studied by scholars and shared with the public, especially when, like this one, they are helpful in understanding our common past. A New Dead Sea Scroll in Stone? Bible-like prophecy was mounted in a wall 2,000 years ago by Ada Yadini. Sidebar, English translation. Sidebar, Hebrew text. Zev Radovan. If it were written on leather, and smaller, I would say it was another Dead Sea Scroll fragment, but it isn't. It is written on grey-colored stone. And it is 3 feet high and 1 foot wide. Otherwise, it strongly resembles in many respects what we have come to expect from fragmentary Dead Sea Scrolls. It is clearly dated by the shape and form of the letters, paleography, to sometime between the late 1st century B.C.E. and early 1st century C.E., around the turn of the era, the same period as the scrolls. This dating is confirmed by the Hebrew of the text, post-biblical and pre-Mishnaic. One would expect that an inscription on stone would be engraved, as are the inscriptions on stone ossuaries, bone boxes, like the now famous ossuary inscribed, James son of Joseph brother of Jesus. But this text is not engraved. Or it is written in ink, just like the Dead Sea Scrolls. Moreover, the text is inscribed in 2 columns, like a scroll, one of 44 lines, the other of 43 lines, for a total of 87 lines of script. Horizontal guidelines that cross the column divide were incised with a thin, sharp instrument, very similar to the guidelines in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Hebrew letters are suspended from the upper guideline, just like the scrolls. Vertical guidelines mark the beginning and end of each of the 2 columns, again like. You complete it. Where did this stone come from? I wish we knew. Chances are it came from Jordan. It simply appeared on the antiquities market, however, and was acquired by Zurich collector David Jeselsohn, who has kindly permitted me to publish it. At one point, it apparently broke in 3 pieces, which still have not yet been glued together. Alas, the text bears another resemblance to the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. It is very badly preserved, with lacunae all over. And the letters that have survived are often very hard to read. The back of the stone is rough and unfinished, unlike the polished side with script. This suggests that the stone was once mounted in a wall. Whether it was inscribed with the stone already mounted in the wall or lying flat on the floor, it must have been very inconvenient to write on the polished side, and this may well account for the rather careless look of the script, which was nevertheless the work of a professional scribe. The text has not been identified, but it is clearly a literary composition, similar to biblical prophecies. It is written in the first person, perhaps by someone named Gabriel, I Gabriel, line 77, so I have named the text, Gabriel's Vision. It is apparently a collection of short prophecies addressed to someone in the second person. Like the prophets of old, whoever wrote this composition proclaims the word of Yahweh, the personal name of the Hebrew God. And, again like the Bible, many of the prophecies open with the words, thus, or therefore, said the Lord, that is, Yahweh, and sometimes the more generic Elohim, of hosts. Sometimes the text uses Elohei Yisrael, God of Israel. There are also numerous references to Yahweh's kavod, or glory, familiar to all students of the Hebrew Bible. The text also mentions, my servant David. Elsewhere it refers to David the servant of Yahweh. Jerusalem is also mentioned several times. Apparently the composer of this text supports the Davidic dynasty. And God shows mercy to thousands, the same expression used in Exodus 20 verse 6, Deuteronomy 5 verse 10, and Jeremiah 32 verse 18. And I will shake the heaven and the earth, lines 24 to 25, is a direct quote from the prophet Haggai 2:6. The text also includes expressions from books of the biblical prophets Zechariah and Daniel. But the composition also includes expressions that do not seem to have parallels elsewhere. The text as a whole is not known from any other Jewish source. In addition to the name Gabriel, the composition refers to the messenger, or angel, Michael, who is mentioned in Daniel 10 verse 13, in the New Testament, Revelation 12 verse 7 and Jude 9, and in extra-biblical sources like Enoch and the Dead Sea Scroll known as the War Scroll, 1 QM. In these extra-biblical sources Michael is frequently mentioned together with Gabriel. It is difficult to be more specific, but it does suggest that the text as a whole is apocalyptic, referring to the end of days, as these are clearly apocalyptic figures. We may conjecture that a rivalry between two messianic groups is involved. There seems to be no doubt that the composer of this text belongs to the group supporting the Davidic Messiah. It is difficult to say more. Perhaps this intriguing text only emphasizes the variety of Jewish movements at the turn of the era, and how much about them we don't yet know. The author asked us to note that she studied this inscription in consultation with Benjamin Eliza. Ed. Footnotes, A. André Lemay, Burial Box of James the Brother of Jesus, bar 28:06. The Messiah son of Joseph, Gabriel's Revelation, and the Birth of a New Messianic Model by Israel Noel Sidebar, Gabriel's Revelation, in English translation by Israel Noel Zevradovan, www. Bibeland Pictures. Dead Sea Scroll in stone. The text is written in 2 columns of ink and dates to the late 1st century B.C.E. or the 1st century C.E., much like the Dead Sea Scrolls. The stone itself measures 3 feet long. Although some of the words are difficult to read, the text, known as Gabriel's Revelation, is clearly apocalyptic in nature. As author Israel Noel discusses, references in the text reflect the Jewish roots of early Christian messianism. A new inscription, recently published in a bar for the first time in English, may hold the key to unlocking a new understanding of some of the history of Christian and Jewish messianism. Written on a stone 3 feet tall, the new text has many of the characteristics of a fragmentary Dead Sea Scroll, including being poorly preserved. Based on the stance and form of the letters, the distinguished decipherers of the inscription, Ada Yardini and Benjamin Eliza, date it to the late 1st century B.C.E. or early 1st century C.E. Yardini describes the text as a literary composition similar to biblical prophecies. From a word or a phrase here and there, she notes that the text is apocalyptic in character and comes from a group that believes in a Davidic Messiah. She calls the text Gabriel's Revelation, or Hazon Gabriel in Hebrew. The Dead Sea Scrolls have, in general, revealed that many of the same religious concepts and beliefs found in Christianity are also found in the scrolls, often appearing first in the scrolls and thereafter surfacing in early Christianity. I believe this is also true of the messianism of Gabriel's Revelation. As we shall see, Gabriel's Revelation has a great deal to tell us about a different kind of Messiah, a Messiah son of Joseph, who is different from the biblical concept of a Davidic Messiah. The tradition of the Messiah son of Joseph and his death first appears in the Babylonian Talmud, Sukkah 52a. The rabbis taught, the Messiah ben David, who, as we hope, will appear in the near future, the Holy One, blessed be he, will say to him, "Ask something of me and I will give it to thee, as it is written, Psalm 2 verses 7 to 8, I will announce the decree. Ask it of me, and I will give," etc. But as the Messiah ben David will have seen that the Messiah ben Joseph who preceded him was killed, he will say before the Lord, Lord of the universe, I will ask nothing of thee but life. And the Lord will answer, this was prophesied already for thee by thy father David, Psalm 21 verse 5, life hath he asked of thee, thou gavest it to him. According to the 7th century apocalyptic text known as Sefer Zerubbabel, the Messiah son of Joseph was killed by the wicked Armilus, and was further resurrected by the Messiah son of David and the prophet Elijah. These traditions are clearly post-Christian, and most scholars regard this Jewish tradition as an impact of Christianity on Judaism. Some evidence, however, indicates that the figure of Messiah son of Joseph is much older. In some texts from around the turn of the era, we encounter Joseph as a son of God who atones for the sins of others with his suffering. For example, in Joseph and Asenath, written between 100 BCE and 115 CE, Joseph is described as son of God, 6:3, 5, 13:13. Joseph is also called God's firstborn son, 18:11, 21:4, 23:10. In another book from the Second Temple period, the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, the Testament of Benjamin connects Joseph and the figure of the suffering servant in Isaiah 52-53. In this testament, Jacob says to Joseph, "In you will be fulfilled the heavenly prophecy which says that the spotless one will be defiled by lawless men and the sinless one will die for the sake of impious men too," emphasis supplied. These citations suggest that the designation of the suffering Messiah as the son of Joseph goes back to sources from the Second Temple period. 3. In another late Midrash, Pesikta Rabbati, the Messiah Ephraim, the son of Joseph, is created. As to him, the sins of others will bend you down under a yoke of iron. The Holy One, blessed be he, asks him if he is willing to endure this suffering. Messiah Ephraim, son of Joseph, asks how long his suffering will last. 7 years, the Holy One replies. After more dialogue, the Messiah Ephraim says, Master of the universe, with joy in my soul and gladness in my heart I take this suffering upon myself, provided not one person in Israel perish, that not only those who are alive be saved in my days, but also those who are dead. For in this passage from the Pesikta Rabbati, the son of Joseph, here Ephraim, also appears as the Messiah identified as the suffering servant in Isaiah. Several scholars have argued that these late passages should be traced to Christian circles. A leading rabbinic 5 scholar, Saul Lieberman, has argued otherwise. I have agreed with Lieberman. I believe Gabriel's revelation, now 6-7 published in Bar, supports the view that the tradition of the Messiah son of Joseph who is killed goes back to the late 1st century BCE or the early 1st century CE. Although much of the text of Gabriel's revelation has not been preserved or is difficult to read, enough is there to make these points. Zev Radovan, www. Bible and Pictures. Com trumping the triumphal Messiah? In lines 16-17 the Lord asks David to request that Ephraim, the son of Joseph, place the sign. The exact nature of this sign is not specified, but it seems to be a sign of salvation. The fact that David is a messenger to Ephraim suggests that David ranked below Ephraim. The passage reads in English, My servant David, ask of Ephraim, that he place the sign, this, I ask of you. As Yadini notes in her Bar article, despite the difficulty in reading the text, it involves messianic groups. The characters it mentions are clearly apocalyptic figures. Among them are 2 we have already encountered in this article, David and Ephraim. In Gabriel's revelation, the Lord addresses David, asking him to request of Ephraim that he place a sign, My servant David, ask of Ephraim, that he place the sign. Lines 16-17. Unfortunately, the nature of the sign is not specified, but it seems to be the sign of salvation. However, the fact that David is sent by God to request Ephraim to place the sign may attest that Ephraim has superior rank. He, and not David, is the key person who is asked to place the sign. David is only the messenger. The expression, my servant David, of course appears often in the Bible as a term of an eschatological leader. See Ezekiel 34 verses 23 and 24, 37:24, 25. And, as we have noted, in the Bible, Ephraim is the son of Joseph. The names, my servant David and Ephraim, mentioned in Gabriel's revelation, are apparently parallel, respectively, to the titles, Messiah son of David and Messiah son of Joseph, in the Talmud, to which I have already called attention. And Ephraim is the name of the Messiah in Pesachta Rabbati, when he is said to suffer in order to atone for Israel. Thus, in this new text on stone, we have the earliest reference to Ephraim as a messianic figure, although in Jeremiah 31 verse 20, the Lord tells Ephraim, truly, Ephraim is a dear son to me, see also Hosea 11 verses 1-8. It is also interesting that this new text seems to predict that in 3 days the evil will be defeated by the righteous. They read as follows, by 3 days you shall know that thus said the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, the evil has been broken by righteousness, lines 19-21. There is more, line 80 begins with the phrase, in 3 days. This is followed by another word that the editors could not read. Then comes the phrase, I, Gabriel. I believe that this illegible word is actually legible. It is the word Aryeh, live. Gabriel the archangel is giving orders to someone to live, in 3 days, you shall live. In other words, in 3 days, you shall return to life, be resurrected. There follow 2 additional words that are also difficult to read. The letters are not easy to make out, but I believe the first word begins with a gimel and a vav. The next word is equally difficult. The letter, lamed, is quite legible, and the letter before it seems to be an ayin. I believe the sentence can be reconstructed as follows, in 3 days, live, I, Gabriel, command you. Leshloshit yamin Aryeh, ani Gavriel, gozer alika. Ada Yadini has since agreed with this reading of Aryeh and with the translation, in 3 days, live, I, Gabriel. Zev Radovan, www. Bibelan Pictures.com, in 3 days, live, I, Gabriel command you. Although the scholars who first published this text considered parts of line 80 to be illegible, Noel believes he can read the word Aryeh, live, and has reconstructed the line to depict the archangel ordering someone to live or rise from the dead, in 3 days. Another portion of the text, lines 19-21, see photo, refers to evil being conquered by good, in 3 days. The archangel is ordering someone to rise from the dead within 3 days. Gabriel is of course well known from the book of Daniel, as well as the Gospel of Luke. In Daniel, Gabriel appears to the prophet in an apocalyptic vision, Daniel 8 verses 13-19. In the famous Annunciation scene in the Gospel of Luke, the angel Gabriel tells Mary that she will bear a son who will be called Son of the Most High, and behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. He will be great, and will be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end. Luke 1 verses 31-33. According to the genealogical lists in Matthew 1 verses 1-16 and Luke 3 verses 23-38, Jesus is a descendant of David. It is said explicitly about Joseph, Jesus' father, that he was of the house and lineage of David, Luke 2 verse 4, see also 1:27, 32, Matthew 1 verse 20. Jesus is also referred to as the Son of David several times elsewhere in the Gospels, Mark 10:46, 11:10, Matthew 9:27, 12:23, 15:22, 20:30, 21:9, Luke 18 verse 38, and subsequently elsewhere in the New Testament, Romans 1 verse 3, 2 Timothy 2 verse 8, Revelation 5:5, 22:16. And the entire nativity story, Matthew 2 verses 1-18, Luke 2 verses 1-29, is designed to emphasize Jesus as a Son of David. According to the nativity accounts, Jesus, like King David, was born in Bethlehem. However, Jesus himself never refers to the Messiah as the Son of David, and he does not mention having any link with the Davidic line. In Gabriel's revelation, we see that another Messiah, Ephraim, or the Messiah son of Joseph, was known already in the late 1st century B.C.E. The Ephraim of Gabriel's revelation was probably based on biblical verses depicting him as the suffering Son of God. See Jeremiah 31 verses 17 to 20, Hosea 11 verses 1 to 8. And the setting of Gabriel's revelation reflects elements of death and bloodshed. The messianic figure of David is traditionally represented as involving bravery, military skill, and triumph. The figure of Ephraim, or the Messiah son of Joseph, symbolizes a very different and new kind of messianism. Ephraim is a messiah of suffering and death. This may shed new light on what has been a puzzling gospel tradition. In parallel passages in the Synoptic Gospels, Mark 12 verses 35 to 37, Matthew 22 verses 41 to 46, Luke 20 verses 41 to 44, Jesus is teaching on the Temple Mount. Surprisingly, he rejects the idea that the Messiah is the son of David. How can the scribes say, Jesus asks, that Christ is the son of David? Mark 12 verse 35. To demonstrate that the Messiah is not the son of David, Jesus quotes Psalm 110, attributed in the Hebrew Bible to David himself. As the text of Mark 12:36 recites, David speaks in the psalm, David himself, inspired by the Holy Spirit, declared. Jesus then recites a passage from the psalm, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, till I put thy enemies under thy feet. Jesus then uses this passage to prove his point. David himself calls him, the Messiah, Lord, so how is he his son? That is, David speaks of the Messiah as, my Lord, rather than as, my son. The Messiah therefore cannot be a son of David. Using Psalm 110 as his proof text, Jesus here refutes the scribes' view that Christ, the Messiah, should be a son or descendant of David. This seems strange in light of the fact that, as I noted earlier, in both Matthew and Luke, Jesus' lineage is specifically traced to David. I am inclined to regard the passage in which Jesus quotes Psalm 110 as a historically reliable passage in which Jesus rejects the view that the Messiah will be a descendant of David. Not only do versions of this incident appear in all three synoptic Gospels, but the very fact that it runs counter to the genealogies of Jesus suggests that this contradictory version must be authentic. Otherwise, the authors of the Gospels would not have included something that so blatantly clashes with their frequent reference to Jesus as the son of David. Some scholars have suggested that Jesus wished to claim that the Messiah is not merely a son of David but rather has a superior status, possibly that of the Son of God. However, if this were the case, we would have expected Jesus to anchor his claim in Psalm 2 verse 7, You are my son, today I have begotten you, rather than on the first verse of Psalm 110, which makes no explicit reference to the Messiah as the Son of God. In citing Psalm 110, Jesus may well be seeking to dispel the prevalent expectation of a triumphal Messiah, the traditional Son of David. His ideal messianic model is different. As with the Messiah Ephraim, son of Joseph, Jesus' Messiah involves suffering and death. The new inscription, Gabriel's revelation, suggests that this different kind of Messiah was evolving at the turn of the era, different from the Messiah son of David. Instead of a militant Messiah, it envisions a Messiah who suffered, died, and rose. Jesus also understood the Messiah to be a son of Joseph. Like in Gabriel's revelation, also in the saying of Jesus, David is secondary to the other Messiah. In Nazareth, Jesus was known as the son of Joseph, Luke 4 verse 22, John 6 verse 42. Thus it is quite possible that Jesus identified himself as the Messiah, Ephraim, the son of Joseph who is mentioned in Gabriel's revelation. 9 footnotes, A. Ada Yadini, A New Dead Sea Scroll in Stone, bar 34:01. B. The Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, tell a generally parallel account, frequently in Hic Verba, of Jesus' life. End notes, 1. See Martha Himmelfarb, Sefer Zerubbabel, in David Stern, and M. J. Mirsky, eds, Rabbinic Fantasies, Imaginative Narratives from Classical Hebrew Literature, Philadelphia, Jewish Publication Society, 1990, pp 67-90. 2. Howard Clark Key, Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs, in James H. Charles Worth, ed., The Old Testament Pseudepigrapha, Volume 1, New York, Doubleday, 1983, page 826. 3. The possible connection between the Testament of Benjamin and the Messiah son of Joseph was already noted by G. H. Dix, The Messiah ben Joseph, Journal of Theologic Studies 27, 1926, pp 135-136, and by J. Jeremias, Theologisches Wörterbuch zum Neuen Testament 5, pp 685-686. 4. Pasikta Rabbati 36, translated from the Hebrew by W. G. Broad, New Haven, Yale University Press, 1968, pp 678-679. 5. C. Azaria dei Rossi, Mir e Naim, ed. David Castle, Vilna, Rom, 1864-1866, page 230. I. Levi, Review des Études Juives 24, pp 283-285, compared to R. Abraham B. Osriel, Haragat Habosem, ede. E. Urbach, Jerusalem 1939, page 265. More recently, see Magnus Zetterholm's Introduction to Magnus Zetterholm, ed. The Messiah in Early Judaism and Christianity, Minneapolis, Fortress Press, 2007, when he argues that the Jesus movement added a new element to the Jewish concept of messianism, a Messiah of Israel who will suffer and die. This is now refuted by Gabriel's revelation, which had not yet been known when Zetterholm wrote. 6. S. Lieberman, Skiing, Jerusalem, Warman Books, 1970, p. 58, 7. See Israel Knoll, on the Son of God, Armilus and Messiah son of Joseph, Tarbiz 68, 1998, pp 13-38, Hebrew with English abstract. 8. Rudolf Bultmann, History of the Synoptic Traditions, Oxford, Blackwell, 1968, pp 66, 136-137, has argued that the account is not historical but reflects the denial of Jesus' Davidic ancestry in a limited circle within the early church. However, as was rightly noted by Bruce Chilton, Jesus Ben David, Reflections on the David Sonfridge, Journal for the Study of the New Testament 14, 1982, page 102, in light of the broad consensus in the New Testament that Jesus was the son of the David, it is difficult to accept that such a circle ever existed within the early church. See further the objection of W. D. Davies and Dale C. Allison, The Gospel According to St. Matthew, ICC, Volume 3, Edinburgh, T. and T. Clark, 1996, page 250. 9. For further details, see Israel Knoll, By 3 Days Live, Messiah's Resurrection and Ascent to Heaven in Hazon Gabriel, The Journal of Religion 88, number 19, 2008, page 152, and Israel Knoll, The Messiah Before Jesus, Berkeley, University of California Press, 2000, pp 17-50.